presence of Roundup, which normally kills bacteria. So they said, great, let's put it in the food supply. This is how they think. So they take the gene out of the bacteria, which resists their death by Roundup, put it into soybeans. Now you can spray the Roundup-ready soybeans with Roundup, not killing the soybeans, just all the other plant biodiversity. And what Roundup does is it sucks up the nutrients, making them unavailable to the plant. It promotes plant pathogens that kill the plant. So now we have soil pathogens run wild all over the country because there's been over a £500 million increase in herbicide use because of the GM crops, mostly Roundup. It's found in the air samples, in the water samples, in the rain samples in the Midwest, where I live. Yuck. So we have this Roundup, which promotes plant pathogens, which sucks out nutrients. So we have weak and sick plants. We have animals eating weak and sick plants. They become weak and sick. We eat the weak and sick animals. We eat the weak and sick plants. We eat the Roundup residue in the crops that's inside. You can't wash it off. It then chelates or binds with our nutrients, making them unavailable. So it is a perfect storm of death and disease still with just the Roundup, not even to mention the Roundup-ready gene, which has properties of a known allergen, a dust mite allergen. So if you're allergic to dust, you might be allergic to Roundup-ready crops. And the only human feeding study ever published showed that the genes inserted into Roundup transferred into the DNA of gut bacteria, and may have continued to function, which means long after we stop eating, see, he didn't like it, long after we stop eating GMOs, we may still have these foreign proteins produced continuously inside of our own digestive tract. Now, when they found 93% of pregnant women with Bt toxin in their blood, they're thinking, well, how come so many women have Bt toxin in their blood when it should be washing out very quickly and regularly? They must be taking it in often. But it's not Mexico with corn tortillas every day, so they figured it is that they eat the milk and meat of animals that do eat GM corn every day. So they must be that not only does Bt toxin survive digestion, it survives digestion in the animals, and then the same toxin is survived digestion in the humans, and that's how it gets into the bloodstream. Aha! But I think a more plausible explanation is that the Bt toxin gene transferred from corn chips into the gut bacteria and continued to function. So we have a reservoir of Bt toxin because it's produced inside of us, turning our intestinal flora into living pesticide factories. That's high in the yuck factor. Agreed? Yeah. Way, way high. These are just some of the problems that should have been evaluated. Now I'm going to just do I got to get to the good stuff soon. So let me finish this up so that we can get to the fun stuff. I'm going to summarize here. I have a film coming out next week. It's called Genetic Roulette, The Gamble of Our Lives. And in it, there's parents of autistic kids that describe how when they took the kids off of GMOs, the gastrointestinal disorders started going away, behavior started to change. I interview many doctors. There's thousands of them prescribing non-GMO diets. They talk about their patients, who I've also interviewed separately, how when they get rid of GMOs, they have changes in irritable bowel and colitis and all sorts of gastrointestinal disorders, all sorts of immune system disorders, all sorts of reproductive problems, headaches, asthma, allergies, weight problems. One woman told me after 25 days on this new diet, 3 days into the diet, no more colitis she had for 30 years. She had lost 10 pounds by then. Now, the humans, to get rid of GMOs, they have to do all sorts of things because it's not labeled. So you can't just choose the non-GM, so they had to go to organic or less processed foods, which brings up a whole bunch of cofactors. Is it the non-GMO diet, or is it the benefits of organic, or is it the lack of the strange compilations they put into the processed foods? And some were avoiding gluten and dairy. So it's like, I can't deal with that. That's just way too many cofactors. Until I spoke to the veterinarians and the farmers, because when they took their animals off of GM corn and soy, they didn't switch to organic. They didn't have gluten-free pigs. And the animals got better sometimes within 2 days of things that had been pummeling their health for years. Pummeling their health in 2 days. And if you look at the livestock, the pigs, the cows, the pets, what they're getting better from, the same categorical problems that the American Academy, we have no way of recalling GMOs from the gene pool. It's a self-propagating genetic pollution. It's giving pollution a life of its own. And we're exposing everyone who eats and the entire ecology. So it's everyone who eats, all living beings, all future generations. And what we're seeing in this first generation when hardly anyone is looking, signs of a collapse of health, even of the technology. The weeds are outsmarting Roundup, the bugs are outsmarting the BT, so they want to bring in Agent Orange crops that withstand half the component of Agent Orange, 2,4-D, acutely toxic. So that's their answer. If they have a problem with one GMO, figure out how to do another one. Are we about ready for the good news? Thank God. Okay, you ready? All right, how many people during this small talk have changed your diet? Anyone? Anyone's changed your diet? I thought so. How many people have, starting to text their kids, don't eat any more GM foods? I had someone said, when we left your lecture, we started texting our kids, don't eat any more GM foods. My son texted back, what's wrong with General Motors? So I just did a concentrated kind of non-stop machine gun. I could have gone on for another 2 hours, truly, and would have been like, oh God. And if I had the pictures, you would have seen the changes in the liver, seen the changes in the rat testicles going from pink to blue, it's true. You would have seen the changes in the size of the rat offspring from the mothers. You would have heard about the hamsters that had, by the third generation on GM soy, most were sterile, and those that gave birth, a lot of them had hair growing in their mouths. You would have seen, I mean, it gets really gnarly, okay? That's a technical term. So we have a situation here where it is very easy simply to tell people the truth about what's happening with GMOs and change their diet on the spot. So now I'm going to tell you the great news. That's all it takes. It's all it takes. You see, this is not like a big policy issue. We need to change the policy of the US government on global warming, on fracking, on all these things. This is something that can be handled by us. And thank goodness. Because the Obama administration put Michael Taylor back in the FDA. They put the Biotech Governor of the Year as Secretary of Agriculture. They put the Monsanto guy as the Director of Agricultural Trade. They've been worse on GMOs than the Bush administration. And I don't see any administration since GMOs were introduced to have anything other than lockstep with Monsanto. WikiLeaks, the State Department, is basically the enforcement wing for Monsanto and company around the world. So thank goodness this is something that we can take care of without asking for a bailout. And here's how. There was a scientist, Dr. Arpad Pusztai, who later became a good friend of mine. But at the time of his troubles, I had never heard of him, although he was the world's greatest scientist in his field. And he worked at the top nutritional research laboratory in England, or in the UK, in Scotland actually, and one of the best in the world. And he was given a $3 million grant to figure out how to test for the safety of GMOs. And lo and behold, much to his surprise and everyone around him, GMOs were not safe. He fed the rats got serious disorders, smaller brains, livers, and testicles, partial atrophied liver, damaged immune system, potentially precancerous cell growth in 10 days. So what he did was, he went public with permission from his director in an interview on TV, was a hero for 2 days at his prestigious institute, until 2 phone calls from the UK Prime Minister's office, forwarded through the receptionist to the director, ultimately resulted in him being fired the next day after 35 years. Silenced with threats of a lawsuit, they attacked his reputation, never implemented his protocols, a complete disaster, and the beginning of a model of what has happened to so many scientists since. But by order of the UK Parliament, the gag order was lifted on February 16th. Now, February 16th, 1999, it's interesting. 3 weeks earlier in San Francisco, the biotech industry projected a 95% replacement of all commercial seeds in the world within 5 years. Their plan was to replace nature. And now it's not just seeds. Now it's insects, it's fish, it's livestock. They want to patent and own and recreate nature, just as Tom was pointing out. So they were on track for replacing nature. But on February 16th, the gag order was lifted, and there was an overwhelming response by the press. Over 700 articles within a month. And 10 weeks later, the tipping point of consumer rejection by who? Unilever. Then Nestle's. Then everyone. Within about a week. Using GMOs had become a marketing liability. The same The same motivation that got GMOs on the market, greed and profit and gaining market share by the biotech industry, took it off the market. Because of the 700 articles of the coverage throughout Europe, which never reached the shores of the US, not coincidentally. So that's why GMOs have been kicked out of Europe, because people know about them. And now they're labeled, and you don't find made with genetically engineered ingredients in Europe, hardly ever, because they know it's a marketing liability. So we started educating consumers about the health risks of bovine growth hormone, Monsanto's genetically engineered drug injected into cows to increase milk supply. I talked to a former Monsanto scientist. He said 3 of his colleagues tested the milk from cows treated, found so much of a cancer-promoting hormone, they refused to drink milk thereafter unless it was organic. One bought his own cow. So we educate people, and now it's now bovine growth hormone. It's been banned in Europe, it's been banned in Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Canada, but now it's banned in Walmart, in Yoplait, in Dannon, in Starbucks, in most American dairies. And we did that. We did that. We didn't have to ask the administration for a bailout. We just said no. And the food companies said, okay. So how many people do we need to avoid GMOs to create a tipping point against all of them? It's not a vote. We don't need Kraft food managers to see a 51% drop in market share and says, great, it's a majority, time to switch out of GMOs. They're not going to say low GMOs, like low fat. There's no... We only have just a little bit of GMOs. And there's no consumer benefit. It's like they don't want to hold on to it because there's that crowd that wants their Roundup. Got to get those BT people, you know, they just love that BT. They can't get it from us, they can just buy the spray and take it internally. So no one is looking for it. No one is looking for it. So there's no compelling reason to hold on to GMOs once they put together that the very traditionally rapid expanding messaging that happens, that runs through the US psyche, trans fats, plastic bags, pink slime, GMOs, wow, get rid of them. It's just like a cell signal. If they can see any drop in market share at all that they can attribute to anti-GMO sentiment, it's like, whoosh, gone. So how many people? 5%. 15 million Americans, 5.6 million households, should be enough. We may be off a little bit in our numbers, but that many people avoiding GMOs, and we will see a non-GMO avalanche. Now, we've been educating people, and you know, if someone skeptically says, how are you going to get the average American to avoid GMOs? You know, you got the couch potato junk food eating American, hasn't yet realized that food relates to health. And I'm going to say that person will never know that he's eating a GMO, and will never know that we got rid of it for him. Because we don't need the average American. We need us. So we are a leveraged commodity, the health conscious, the nature conscious, and we are enough. If we're looking for 5%, 15 million, we have 28 million people that buy organic on a regular basis. What about moms of young kids? Not for themselves, but for their kids. What about the sick people? What about the progressive doctors? There are thousands now prescribing non-GMO diets. What about the religious people that think GMO means God move over? There are enough people in any one of these categories to drive the tipping point on its own. And with these people, it's not like you have to meet resistance. In fact,